When Marcus Blackstone's $50,000 prized golden retriever went missing, he never imagined that the person who would save his beloved pet would be someone he walked past every day without even seeing. Before starting the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. The morning of Tuesday, October 15th, started with the same routine that Marcus Blackstone had followed for the past 8 years. At exactly 6:30 a.m., the 52-year-old CEO of Blackstone Financial Group stepped out of his $15 million penthouse on Fifth Avenue, wearing his signature navy Armani suit and Italian leather shoes that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Max, his 2-year-old golden retriever, bounded beside him with the enthusiasm that only a champion bloodline dog could display. The dog wasn't just a pet. He was a carefully bred specimen worth more than most luxury cars, with a pedigree that traced back to 5 generations of Westminster dog show winners. "Stay close, buddy," Marcus muttered absently, his attention already focused on his phone as he scrolled through overnight reports from the Tokyo markets. At 52, Marcus had built Blackstone Financial into an $800 million empire. But success had come at a price. His wife had left him 3 years earlier, taking their teenage daughter with her. His friends were business associates who saw dollar signs when they looked at him. Max was the only relationship in his life that felt genuine and unconditional. The morning walk was a sacred routine. Down Fifth Avenue, past the homeless encampments that seemed to multiply despite the city's efforts to clear them, around the southern loop of Central Park, and back home in exactly 45 minutes. It was during this walk that Marcus conducted his most important phone calls, reviewed market analyses, and planned his day. But Marcus had a problem he didn't even recognize. He had become completely invisible to the world around him. Not in the way that homeless people were invisible to him, but in the way that extreme wealth and power could isolate a person from genuine human connection. He walked through the world in a bubble of privilege that kept him from seeing the very humanity he passed every single day. On this particular Tuesday, as they approached the intersection of 72nd Street and Fifth Avenue, Marcus was deep in conversation with his head trader about a potential merger in Hong Kong. He barely noticed the homeless woman sitting outside the subway entrance, the same woman who had been there for months, always quiet, always dignified, never aggressive in asking for help. That's when the city bus backfired. The sudden explosive sound shattered the morning calm like a gunshot. Max, despite his expensive training and normally calm demeanor, bolted in pure terror. The custom leather leash, which Marcus had been holding loosely while gesturing during his phone call, slipped from his grip in an instant. "Max!" Marcus screamed, dropping his phone so hard it cracked against the sidewalk. "Max!" But the golden retriever was already disappearing into the maze of Manhattan streets, running blindly through traffic, between parked cars, and into the urban labyrinth where a frightened animal could vanish without a trace. For the first time in his adult life, Marcus Blackstone completely lost his composure. The man who could negotiate billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat was now running down Fifth Avenue in his $3,000 suit, shouting at the top of his lungs for his dog. "Has anyone seen a golden retriever?" he called out desperately to anyone who would listen. "He's wearing a blue collar with diamonds. There's a $100,000 reward." People stopped and stared. Some pulled out their phones to record the spectacle of a clearly wealthy man having what appeared to be a complete breakdown in public. But no one had seen Max. For the next 8 hours, Marcus did something unprecedented. He talked to everyone: street vendors, doormen, joggers, tourists, delivery drivers, and yes, even the homeless people he had ignored for years. His voice grew hoarse from calling Max's name. His expensive shoes wore thin from walking miles of pavement. His perfect appearance became disheveled as sweat and desperation replaced his usual controlled demeanor. He posted the $100,000 reward on every social media platform, hired 3 different private investigators, contacted animal control, called veterinary clinics, and even considered hiring a helicopter to search Central Park from the air. But as the sun began to set, Max was still missing. Marcus stood on the steps of his building that evening, staring out at the city that had swallowed his beloved companion. For the first time in years, he felt completely powerless. All his money, all his influence, all his connections, none of it could bring Max home. Meanwhile, 18 blocks away, Dr. Charlotte Williams was experiencing her own crisis of a very different nature. Charlotte had been homeless for exactly 8 months and 12 days, but she still counted each one, still held on to the hope that this nightmare would end and she could reclaim the life she had worked so hard to build. Once upon a time, she had been Dr. Charlotte Williams, DVM, owner of the most successful veterinary practice in Boston's Back Bay neighborhood. She had treated championship dogs, performed life-saving surgeries, and built a reputation as one of the most skilled veterinary surgeons on the East Coast. The decline had started with small things: forgetting appointments, misplacing surgical instruments, losing track of conversations mid-sentence. At first, she attributed it to stress and overwork, but when she accidentally prescribed the wrong medication dosage for a client's beloved cat, nearly causing its death, she knew something was seriously wrong. The diagnosis came on a cold February morning: early-onset Alzheimer's disease at the age of 45. The medical community that had once embraced her suddenly became cold and distant. Who wanted a veterinarian who might forget crucial details in the middle of surgery? The malpractice insurance company canceled her policy. Clients began requesting different doctors. Her staff, once fiercely loyal, started updating their resumes. Charlotte tried to fight it. She spent her life savings on experimental treatments, traveled to clinics in Switzerland and Germany, participated in every clinical trial available. But the disease was relentless, and the medical bills were crushing. When she could no longer afford the treatments, she lost her practice. When she lost her practice, she couldn't pay her mortgage. When she lost her house, she had nowhere to go. Family had never been an option. Her parents had died years earlier, and she had no siblings. The few friends she thought she could count on proved unwilling to take in someone with a progressive degenerative disease. The medical colleagues who had once respected her expertise now saw her as a liability and a reminder of their own vulnerability. New York had been her last hope for a fresh start, but the city was expensive and unforgiving. Without a permanent address, she couldn't get a job. Without a job, she couldn't get an apartment. The cruel cycle had trapped her on the streets, watching her savings dwindle to nothing while she tried to maintain some semblance of dignity and hope. Charlotte had chosen the subway entrance at 72nd and Broadway as her regular spot because it offered some protection from weather and the foot traffic was heavy enough to provide opportunities for help, but not so busy that she felt completely overwhelmed. She had learned the unspoken rules of street life: don't be aggressive, don't make people uncomfortable, and always maintain whatever dignity you could salvage. Her cardboard sign was simple: veteran seeking help. God bless. She didn't mention that she was a medical professional. People either didn't believe her or treated her with a pity that was somehow worse than indifference. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, Charlotte was sitting in her usual spot when she heard the whimpering. At first, she thought it might be another homeless person in distress. The sounds of suffering were commonplace in her world now. But something about the tone made her professional instincts kick in. This wasn't human distress. This was an animal in trouble. Following the sound into the alley beside the subway entrance, Charlotte discovered a beautiful golden retriever cowering behind a pile of garbage bags. The dog was clearly terrified, shaking uncontrollably, and appeared to be suffering from dehydration and exhaustion. Charlotte's veterinary training immediately took over, temporarily pushing aside her current circumstances. She approached the dog slowly, speaking in the calm, soothing voice she had perfected over 15 years of practice. "Hey there, beautiful boy," she said softly, noting the dog's expensive collar and perfect grooming despite his current distressed state. "You're not from around here, are you? Someone's missing you something terrible, I bet." The dog responded to her calm energy, allowing her to get close enough for a proper examination. Male, approximately 2 years old, golden retriever, champion bloodline based on his bone structure and coat quality. The dog was dehydrated and stressed, but appeared to have no serious injuries. His behavior suggested he was well-trained and socialized, definitely someone's beloved pet, not a stray. Charlotte read the name Max engraved on his diamond-studded collar, along with what appeared to be a phone number, though several digits had been worn away by his adventure through the city streets. "Max?" she said, and the dog's ears perked up immediately. "That's your name, isn't it? Max, your family must be going crazy looking for you." Charlotte faced a dilemma that would have been inconceivable in her previous life. She had exactly $4.73 to her name, money she had been saving for dinner that night. She could barely feed herself, let alone care for a dog. But every veterinary instinct, every moment of her professional training, screamed that she couldn't abandon this frightened animal. Using 3 of her 4 remaining dollars, Charlotte bought bottled water from a nearby vendor and carefully helped Max drink. She assessed his condition more thoroughly, checking his gums for signs of dehydration, feeling his nose for fever, examining his paws for cuts from running through the city streets. "You're a tough guy, Max," she murmured as she worked. "Scared and tired, but you're going to be okay. Let's see if we can figure out how to get you home." Charlotte's phone had been disconnected months ago when she could no longer pay the bill, but she convinced a sympathetic tourist to let her use their device to try calling the number on Max's collar. The partial digits she could make out didn't lead to a working number, but she was able to access social media long enough to see posts about a missing golden retriever with a massive reward being offered. The posts were from someone named Marcus Blackstone, and the address listed was less than 20 blocks away. As night fell, Charlotte made a decision that would change 2 lives forever. She couldn't keep Max indefinitely. She had no resources to care for him properly. But she also couldn't abandon him to wander the dangerous streets. She would spend the night keeping him safe and warm, and in the morning, she would find a way to get him home. That night was one of the longest in Charlotte's life. She shared her meager dinner, a sandwich and apple from a church food bank, with Max, giving him most of the food while she survived on the apple and water. The dog seemed to understand that she was helping him, staying close to her cardboard shelter and providing a warmth and companionship she hadn't felt in months. "You know what's funny, Max?" Charlotte said as they huddled together against the October chill. "I used to save dogs like you every day. Had a beautiful clinic, staff of 6 people, clients who trusted me with their most precious family members. Now I can't even save myself." Max seemed to sense her sadness, resting his head on her arm in a gesture of comfort that brought tears to her eyes. "But I'm going to save you," she whispered. "Whatever it takes, I'm going to get you home where you belong." The next morning, Charlotte woke before dawn and made her way to the library as soon as it opened. Using the public computers, she researched everything she could find about Marcus Blackstone and his missing dog. The social media posts were desperate, heartbroken, and increasingly frantic. This wasn't just a wealthy man who had lost an expensive possession. This was someone whose heart was breaking over a beloved companion. The address was in one of Manhattan's most exclusive neighborhoods, the kind of building Charlotte had once visited in her professional capacity when she made house calls for wealthy clients. Now she would be approaching from the other side, as someone the doorman would immediately try to remove. But she had to try. The walk to Marcus Blackstone's building took 45 minutes, with Charlotte stopping frequently to let Max rest and drink water from her remaining bottle. By the time they arrived at the gleaming apartment building, Charlotte was acutely aware of how she must appear. Her clothes were wrinkled and stained, her hair hadn't been professionally cut in months, and she smelled like the streets because that's where she lived. The doorman's reaction was immediate and predictable. "Ma'am, you cannot loiter here," he said curtly, moving to position himself between Charlotte and the building entrance. "I'm going to have to ask you to move along." "I'm here to return Mr. Blackstone's dog," Charlotte replied calmly, her voice carrying traces of the authority and confidence she had once wielded daily. "Max went missing yesterday morning." The doorman's expression shifted from dismissal to confusion, and then to something approaching shock. This homeless woman had the missing dog that half of Manhattan was looking for? "You stay right there," he said, reaching for his phone with shaking hands. "Don't move. Don't even think about moving." Marcus Blackstone hadn't slept in 38 hours. His usually immaculate appearance was completely disheveled. His hair was unkempt, his expensive clothes were wrinkled, and his eyes were red and swollen from exhaustion and worry. When his doorman called about someone claiming to have Max, Marcus practically ran to the elevator, his heart pounding with a mixture of hope and fear. The scene that greeted him in the marble lobby was nothing like what he had expected. There was Max, very much alive, tail wagging tentatively, looking tired but healthy. And holding his leash was a black woman who appeared to have been living on the streets. Her clothes were worn and dirty, her hair was unkempt, and she had the weathered look of someone who had been surviving outside for months. Marcus's first instinct was suspicion mixed with desperate relief. Had this woman stolen Max? Was this some elaborate scam to extract the reward money? But then he saw the way Max was behaving around her. Comfortable, trusting, even affectionate. This wasn't the behavior of a dog who had been with a stranger or someone who had harmed him. "You found him," Marcus said, his voice hoarse with emotion as he knelt down to embrace his beloved companion. Max practically knocked him over with enthusiasm, licking his face and whimpering with what could only be described as joy at their reunion. For several minutes, nothing else existed except the relief of having Max back safe. Marcus buried his face in the dog's fur, feeling tears he hadn't shed since childhood running down his cheeks. Finally, he looked up at Charlotte, who had been standing quietly, watching the reunion with a small smile on her face. "Where did you find him?" Marcus asked, his voice still shaky with emotion. "Behind a dumpster about 18 blocks from here," Charlotte replied. "He was scared and dehydrated but otherwise unharmed. I gave him water and food and kept him safe overnight." Marcus studied Charlotte more carefully, his business instincts beginning to reassert themselves, even as his heart continued to race with relief. Despite her rough appearance, there was something about her that didn't fit his assumptions about homeless people. Her posture was straight, her voice was educated and articulate, and the way she had handled Max suggested knowledge and experience. "You spent the night with him on the street?" Marcus asked. "I couldn't leave him alone. He was terrified and confused. I thought someone might hurt him or he might run away again." "And you fed him?" "Shared my dinner with him. He was hungry." Marcus felt something shift inside his chest, an unfamiliar emotion he couldn't quite identify. This woman, who clearly had nothing, had sacrificed her own comfort and food to keep his dog safe. She could have just brought Max to the building immediately and collected the reward. Instead, she'd spent her own resources to care for him. "The reward," Marcus said, reaching for his wallet. "I promised $100,000 for his safe return. Let me call my bank and arrange an immediate transfer." Charlotte shook her head firmly. "I don't want your money." Marcus stared at her, completely confused. In his world, everything was about money. Every relationship, every transaction, every human interaction ultimately came down to financial considerations. "What do you want then?" "Nothing," Charlotte said simply. "He needed help. I was able to help him. That's enough." "That can't be enough," Marcus insisted. "You must want something. Everyone wants something." Charlotte looked at him with an expression that was part sadness, part pity. "Mr. Blackstone, there are some things in this world that can't be bought with money. Sometimes people do the right thing simply because it's the right thing to do." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. When was the last time someone had done something for him, or even for his dog, without expecting payment? When was the last time he had encountered genuine kindness with no strings attached? "You know about dogs," Marcus said, studying Charlotte more intently. "The way you handle Max, the way you assessed his condition. You're not just someone who found a stray animal." Charlotte hesitated. She had learned to keep her past private on the streets. People either didn't believe her story or treated her with a pity she couldn't bear. But something about this moment, about Marcus's genuine confusion and Max's continued affection toward her, made her decide to tell the truth. "I'm a veterinarian," she said quietly. "Or I was. 15 years of practice. I had my own clinic in Boston." The silence that followed was so complete that Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. This homeless woman, whom he had probably walked past dozens of times without seeing, was a doctor. Someone who had dedicated her life to healing and helping animals like Max. "What happened?" he asked, his voice much softer now. Charlotte looked away, the familiar shame washing over her like a tide. This was always the hardest part of the story to tell. "Early-onset Alzheimer's disease, diagnosed at 45. The medical bills drained my savings. The progressive symptoms cost me my practice. When I couldn't work anymore, couldn't afford treatment." She shrugged, a gesture that somehow conveyed the enormity of her loss. Here I am. Marcus felt the world tilt around him. Everything he thought he understood about success, failure, worth, and circumstance was suddenly called into question. This woman hadn't chosen to be homeless. She hadn't made bad decisions or failed to work hard enough. She had been struck by a devastating illness that had systematically destroyed everything she had built. "You spent your last money to buy Max water," Marcus said, the pieces of the story coming together in his mind. $3 for a bottle of water, yes. And you slept on the street with him to keep him safe. Where else would I go? And you refused to take the reward money because you didn't do it for money. I did it because it was the right thing to do. Marcus felt something crack open inside his chest, something that had been locked away for years. Standing in his elegant lobby, looking at this woman who had given everything to keep his beloved dog safe, he realized he was facing someone with more integrity and nobility than anyone in his wealthy, privileged circle. "Dr. Williams," he said, using her title deliberately, "I can't just give you money and walk away from this." "You don't owe me anything," Charlotte replied. "Max is home. That's all that matters." "No," Marcus said, his voice growing stronger and more determined. "That's where you're wrong. I owe you everything. But more than that, I think I need to understand how someone like you ends up invisible to someone like me." He paused, looking between Charlotte and Max, who was sitting between them, as if he understood the importance of this conversation. "I have a proposition for you, Dr. Williams. My veterinarian retired 6 months ago, and I've been looking for someone to provide private care for Max. The position comes with a generous salary, full medical benefits, and living accommodations." Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Blackstone, you don't understand. I can't practice veterinary medicine anymore. The Alzheimer's affects my judgment, my memory, my ability to make critical decisions. I could hurt an animal by making mistakes." "Then we'll adapt," Marcus said without hesitation. "You still have more knowledge about animal care and behavior than anyone else I could hire. We'll create support systems, modified responsibilities, whatever accommodations are necessary. You can advise on Max's care, help me understand his needs better, maybe even help with the rescue organization I've been thinking about starting." "Why?" Charlotte whispered, overwhelmed by the offer. "Why would you do this for someone you don't even know?" Marcus looked down at Max, then back at Charlotte. "Because you saw my dog when he needed help, and you didn't hesitate to sacrifice your own well-being for his safety. Because in 30 years of business dealings, I've never encountered someone with more genuine character than you've shown in the last 10 minutes. He paused, his voice growing quieter but more intense. "And because I've been walking past people like you for years without seeing them, and that makes me a much smaller person than the woman who gave her last $3 to help a stranger's dog." 3 months later, Dr. Charlotte Williams sat in the passenger seat of Marcus's Mercedes as they drove to the grand opening of the Blackstone Animal Rescue Foundation. She was wearing professional clothes again, a navy blue suit that fit perfectly, her hair styled and professionally cut, and for the first time in over a year, she felt like herself again. The foundation had been Marcus's idea, but Charlotte had helped design every aspect of its mission and programs. They rescued animals from high-kill shelters, provided free veterinary care to pets owned by homeless individuals, created job training programs for people experiencing homelessness, and funded research into animal-assisted therapy for people with degenerative diseases. "Nervous about the speech?" Marcus asked as they pulled up to the gleaming new facility that bore both their names on the entrance. "A little," Charlotte admitted. "It's been 18 months since I spoke in front of a professional crowd." "You'll be magnificent," Marcus said with confidence. "Besides, Max will be there for moral support." Charlotte laughed, looking back at Max in the rear seat. The golden retriever had become her constant companion and unofficial therapy animal, helping her navigate the challenges of living with Alzheimer's while maintaining her dignity and purpose. His presence helped her remember who she was when the disease made her forget. The opening event was attended by over 300 people, reporters, city officials, major donors, veterinary professionals, and representatives from homeless service organizations. Marcus introduced Charlotte as the Foundation's Chief Director of Animal Welfare, crediting her expertise and vision for the program's innovative and comprehensive approach. 18 months ago, Charlotte told the packed auditorium, her voice clear and strong, I was homeless, invisible to most of the world, and felt like I had lost everything that defined me as a person and as a professional. But I learned something profound during that dark period. Our lowest moments can become the foundation for our greatest contributions to the world. She gestured toward the facility around them. Every animal we save here, every person we help, every barrier we break down represents a fundamental truth that everyone deserves to be seen, to be valued, and to have the opportunity for dignity and purpose, regardless of their circumstances. After the event, as they sat in Charlotte's office watching Max play with several rescue dogs in the facility's specially designed therapy garden, Marcus turned to his friend and colleague. Do you ever regret not taking the reward money that first day? He asked. Charlotte smiled, watching Max patiently teaching a shy rescue puppy how to play fetch. What reward money? The $100,000 I offered for finding Max. Oh, that, Charlotte said with a knowing grin. Marcus, I got something infinitely more valuable than money. What's that? A purpose that matters, a future worth working toward, proof that losing everything you think defines you can be the first step toward discovering who you really are. She paused, watching Max gently encourage the timid puppy to engage with the other dogs. But most importantly, I learned that invisible doesn't mean worthless, that circumstances don't determine character, and that sometimes the most beautiful rescues happen when broken people help heal each other. Marcus nodded, understanding completely. Finding Max had changed both their lives, but in ways neither of them could have predicted when Charlotte first walked into that marble lobby. Charlotte had taught him that true wealth wasn't measured in portfolios and profit margins, but in the connections we make and the lives we touch. She had shown him that the most valuable people are often the ones we overlook, and that genuine character reveals itself not in times of success, but in moments of profound adversity. And Charlotte had discovered that endings could be beginnings, that professional setbacks didn't negate personal worth, and that sometimes losing everything is just another way of finding what you were meant to do all along. 1 year later, the Blackstone-Williams Animal Rescue Foundation had helped place over 1,200 animals in loving homes, provided free veterinary care to more than 2,500 pets belonging to homeless individuals, and created job opportunities for 89 people transitioning out of homelessness. Charlotte's innovative programs had been replicated in 23 cities across the country, and her story had inspired a national movement that connected animal welfare with human dignity services. Marcus still took his morning walk with Max, but now their route included stops at the foundation, visits with people he had once walked past without seeing, and conversations that enriched his life in ways his wealth never could. He had discovered that the most meaningful part of his day wasn't checking his investment returns. It was the genuine human connections he made along the way. You know what I realized? Charlotte said one evening as they watched the sunset from the foundation's rooftop terrace, surrounded by dogs who were waiting for their forever families. What's that? Marcus asked. I spent 15 years as a veterinarian thinking my job was to save animals, Charlotte replied, watching Max contentedly lying among the rescue dogs like a benevolent patriarch. But it turns out, all those years, they were the ones saving me. They were teaching me about unconditional love, about loyalty, about finding joy in simple moments. She paused, her voice growing softer but more profound. And Max, sweet Max, he brought us together so we could save each other. He got lost so that we could both be found. The story of Charlotte Williams and Marcus Blackstone became more than just a tale of a lost dog being returned. It became a testament to the truth that everyone has value, everyone has a story worth hearing, and everyone deserves the chance to be more than their current circumstances suggest. True rescue isn't just about finding what's lost, it's about discovering what was there all along, waiting to be seen, waiting to be valued, waiting for someone to look beyond the surface and recognize the humanity that connects us all. Sometimes the person who saves your life is someone you've been walking past every day without seeing. And sometimes The greatest wealth isn't what you can buy. It's what you can give, what you can build, and who you can become when you finally learn to see the invisible people who make the world a more compassionate place. If this story touched your heart, remember that there are Charlotte Williams all around us, people whose current circumstances don't reflect their worth, whose stories we never hear because we never stop long enough to listen. The most expensive thing we can possess isn't money or status. It's the wisdom to recognize that every person we encounter has the potential to change our lives, if only we have the courage to truly see them. Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.